the rejection. The rain fell heavy in the alien city. The streets were wet, and the lights from glowing lanterns reflected in every puddle. Crowds of strange beings moved through the market, their eyes glowing in the dark, their voices sharp like broken metal. The air smelled of smoke, wet stone, and fear. In the center of the market, a young alien girl knelt in the mud. Her skin carried a soft purple glow under the lantern light. Her hair long and pale, falling across her face like broken silk. She wore only rough pieces of cloth tied around her body, torn and dirty from years of servitude. She was not free, she was a slave, and everyone in the market knew it. Her master stood tall above her, his body covered in dark armor, his face hidden behind a cruel mask. He raised his hand and threw a plate of food down into the mud, the scraps of fruit and bread splashing dirty water onto her skin. The crowd laughed, their voices sharp. The master's voice echoed, deep and angry. Eat from the ground, animal. You have no right to stand. You belong to me. The girl stared at the plate in the mud. Hunger burned in her empty stomach. She had not eaten for days, her body weak, but her eyes still held a fire. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the food. But then she stopped. Something inside her whispered no. She lifted her head slowly, rain dripping from her hair, and with a broken but clear voice, she said the words that no one in the market expected. No! The crowd froze. Whispers spread like smoke. A slave refusing her master. It was unthinkable. Her master's armored hands tightened into fists. His rage filled the air. He stepped closer, his boots sinking into the mud beside her. You dare refuse me, he hissed. You are nothing, you are mine. You live only because I allow it. The girl's body shook, but she kept her eyes steady. Her voice was weak, but every word carried strength. I will not eat like an animal. The silence grew heavy. Around them, the aliens gathered closer, their strange faces glowing under the lantern light. Some smiled with cruel delight, waiting for punishment. Others watched with fear, afraid that the master's anger would spill into the crowd. Her master bent down, his masked face inches from hers, his voice like poisoned steel. Then starve, until your pride breaks, until you crawl and beg for dirt. He kicked the plate, scattering food into the mud, mixing it with stones and filth. The girl lowered her head, her long hair hiding her face, but inside her chest her heart beat strong. Her pride was stronger than her hunger. Even if she suffered, she would not bow. The rain grew heavier, drumming on the roofs and streets. The mud clung to her skin, cold and dirty, but she stayed still. The crowd began to laugh again, pointing, mocking, calling her weak. They wanted to see her crawl, to see her break, but she did not move. Her body was shaking from cold and hunger, yet her spirit burned brighter. Every cruel word, every laugh, only made her heart harder. She knew she was alone, but still she chose rejection. Better to suffer than to live like a broken animal. The master raised his arm high, ready to strike her. The crowd leaned forward, waiting for the blow. But just as his hand began to fall, the storm of rain grew louder. And somewhere in the shadows of the market, someone was watching. The humiliation. The rain did not stop. It poured harder, filling the streets with streams of dirty water. The young alien girl stayed on her knees in the mud, her body shivering, her clothes torn and soaked. She had rejected her master, and now the whole market wanted to see her break. The master stood tall, his voice cutting through the rain. Crawl, he ordered, his tone filled with venom. The crowd gathered closer, their strange alien eyes glowing in the storm light. Some shouted, "Make her eat." Others laughed, their laughter sharp and cruel. The girl stared at the mud, where pieces of fruit and bread were half buried in the water. Her stomach twisted in pain. Hunger clawed at her insides like knives. Every breath was heavy. Every second felt longer than a lifetime. But still she did not move. The master bent low, grabbing her by the hair, pulling her head back so the crowd could see her face. Her eyes shone with tears, but also with fire. The master roared, "Look at this animal. Too proud to eat, too weak to fight. She is nothing." The aliens cheered, throwing small scraps of rotten food at her. One piece hit her shoulder. Another struck her cheek, sliding down with the rain. She closed her eyes, her lips trembling. But she would not give them the pleasure of begging. She let the filth fall onto her, her silence louder than any scream. The master released her hair, letting her fall back into the mud. Her knees sank deeper. Her hands pressed against the cold ground to hold herself steady. The taste of dirt filled her mouth as the rain splashed against her face. The crowd screamed again, some chanting, "Eat, eat, eat." Their voices like a storm of hatred. She looked down at the scattered food, her stomach roaring. The smell was foul, but her body cried for it. Her hands shook, almost reaching, almost surrendering, but then she pulled them back. Her heart whispered louder than her hunger. "No!" The master's rage grew darker. His armored boots stomped into the mud near her hand, spraying filth across her body. "You will eat, or you will die in the dirt," he hissed. The crowd laughed again, some mocking her, crawling in the mud themselves, pretending to be her. Each laugh was a knife, each word a chain pulling tighter. But still she would not break. Her breath was weak, her body close to collapse. Yet her pride was unbroken. For every scrap of food in the mud, she saw her dignity, and she refused to let it be stolen. Then something crueler happened. One alien from the crowd stepped forward, holding a plate. Instead of offering it, he dropped it into the mud before her and stomped it flat. The crowd cheered again, their laughter rising like thunder. More followed, throwing rotten skins, spoiled meat, and cold bones at her. They wanted her to crawl like an animal, to lick food from the ground, to prove she was nothing. The girl's tears mixed with the rain, falling quietly down her cheeks. She did not wipe them, she did not hide them, but still she kept her head lifted, her eyes locked on the master. Even in her humiliation, she refused to bow. The master raised his hand, his voice booming. "This is what happens to slaves who forget their place." He turned to the crowd, his tone full of pride. "Remember this. No one defies me. No one rejects me." The aliens clapped, shouted, and laughed, their voices filling the night. But not all were smiling. In the shadows of the market, some eyes watched in silence, some with pity, some with quiet anger, and one pair of human eyes burned the brightest. The girl felt the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. Her pride was her only shield. She was starving, soaked, humiliated before hundreds, yet her spirit whispered, "Better to suffer than to be broken." She pushed her hand into the mud, steadying herself. Her knees shook, her breath weak, but she did not lower her mouth to the ground. Her silence, her refusal, was louder than every laugh, every insult, every order. She stayed strong, even as her body cried for mercy. And in that moment, when her master lifted his arm once more to strike her down, the silence broke. From the edge of the crowd, a deep voice spoke, strong, calm, and filled with anger. "That is enough." The crowd turned, their laughter dying. Through the sheets of rain, a tall figure stepped forward. A human, a stranger appears. The voice was calm, yet it cut through the storm like thunder. "That is enough," it said. The market fell silent. The laughter stopped. The chants died. Every alien turned to see who had spoken. Through the rain, a figure stepped forward. His steps were heavy but steady, his shape tall and strong. The lanterns reflected on his wet armor, black and silver, scratched from battles long past. His face was not hidden behind a mask like the others. It was human. Gasps spread across the crowd. Humans were rare here, and most aliens feared them. Stories whispered of their stubborn hearts, their strange courage, their dangerous fire. Some said humans never bent, some said humans never broke. The stranger walked closer, his boots sinking into the mud. His eyes locked on the girl kneeling in the dirt. Her master stepped forward, furious that someone dared interrupt. "This is my slave," the master roared, his voice echoing against the stone walls of the market. "She is mine to punish, mine to break. Who are you to interfere?" The human did not stop walking. His hand rested near the weapon at his side, but he did not reach for it, not yet. When he spoke, his voice was low but filled with iron. "No being is property." The crowd stirred, whispers like wind through the rain. No one had spoken such words in the market before. Some laughed nervously, others fell back in fear. They knew this human was trouble. The girl lifted her head. Her pale hair stuck to her face with rain and mud. Her eyes widened at the sound of his words. No one had ever spoken for her. No one had ever said she was more than dirt. For a moment, her heart felt lighter, though her body trembled with weakness. The master raised a hand to silence the whispers. His voice burned with rage. "You do not belong here, human. Walk away before you share her fate." The stranger did not move. His eyes glowed with steady fire. "She has suffered enough," he said, "and I will not walk away." The crowd gasped again. The tension grew heavy. The aliens looked at each other, unsure if they were about to witness death or history. The rain beat harder. Thunder rolled across the skies. Every sound in the market seemed sharper, louder, as the storm grew. The master laughed behind his cruel mask, a sound hollow and sharp. "You think you can stand against me, against my guards, against my power?" His armored hand pointed at the girl, still kneeling, still shaking. "She is weak, she is broken, and soon you will be the same." The human's eyes did not leave the girl. Her pride had survived where her strength had failed. He saw in her the same fire that lived in his own people, that same refusal to break. And in that moment, he knew he could not leave her behind. Finally, he raised his head, his voice steady. "Try and stop me." The crowd roared, some cheering the master, others whispering fear of the human. The guards stepped forward, weapons gleaming under the storm light, their faces twisted, ready for blood. The master's laughter grew louder, confident that the stranger would be crushed. But the human stood firm, unmoving, his hand now gripping the hilt of his blade. The storm crashed above. Lightning tore the sky. The girl's heart pounded as she stared at him. For the first time in her life, she felt the spark of hope. The master raised his arm, giving the order. The guards rushed forward. The crowd screamed. The girl gasped, her body too weak to stand, but her spirit refusing to look away. She would not turn from the first soul who had dared to defend her. And as the first guard swung his weapon through the rain, the human moved, faster than the crowd could believe. The clash of steel against steel rang out like a bell through the storm. The fight had begun. The challenge. The first clash of steel echoed through the storm. The guards surrounded the human, their blades flashing in the lantern light. The crowd roared with excitement, their voices shaking the wet air. They wanted blood. They wanted to see the stranger crushed. But the human did not step back. He moved with calm precision, his blade rising and striking with speed. Each swing was controlled, each movement sharp like lightning. The first guard fell to the mud, his weapon torn from his hands. Gasps spread through the market. Few had seen a human fight, and fewer had lived to tell the story. The girl watched, her heart racing, her breath trembling. Her master shouted orders, his voice sharp with anger. "Kill him!" The master roared. "Break him! Show this fool what happens to those who defy me." More guards rushed forward, their boots splashing in the rising water, their weapons aimed at the human's chest. But the stranger turned like a storm wind, blocking one strike, shoving another aside. His blade cut through the rain, fast, relentless, unstoppable. The crowd was torn. Some screamed in excitement, others whispered in fear. This was no ordinary wanderer, no weak traveler. This was a human warrior, and his fire was dangerous. The girl pressed her hands into the mud, trying to rise, but her body was too weak. Still, her eyes never left the fight. Every time the human struck, she felt a spark of hope. Every time he stood tall, she felt less like an animal and more like someone worth saving. The master stepped back, his armored hand tightening in rage. He watched his guards fall one by one, their bodies splashing into the dirt. He shouted again, but his voice now carried fear beneath the anger. "Do you think you can win?" he hissed through his mask. "You are alone, human. This is not your fight." The human stood in the storm, his blade dripping with rain. His eyes locked on the master, his voice calm but strong. "It became my fight the moment I saw her crawl in the mud." The crowd fell silent at his words. They had never heard such defiance. They had never seen someone speak against the master so boldly. The girl felt tears burn her eyes. No one had ever spoken for her. No one had ever stood against her master. But this human had, and his words struck deeper than any blade. The master raised his hand, his voice like thunder. "You will regret those words, human. I will break you in front of them all." The rain poured harder. Lightning ripped across the sky. The guards were gone, beaten and broken. Only the master remained. He drew his own weapon, a long curved blade glowing with alien energy. The crowd cheered, waiting for the true fight to begin. The girl held her breath. Her heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to scream, to warn him, but her voice was trapped by fear. She could only watch as the human faced her master. The master raised his blade high. The human lifted his own, calm, steady, unshaken. The storm raged around them, water flooding the streets. Every eye in the market was fixed on the two figures standing in the rain. The girl's master shouted, his voice filled with fury. "She is mine. She belongs to me. And you will die for trying to steal her." The human answered, his voice sharp as the storm itself. "She belongs to no one." The crowd gasped again. Some shouted for the master. Others whispered that the human spoke truth. The tension was thick, ready to break like glass. The master charged, his glowing blade cutting through the rain. The human met him, their blades crashing together with the sound of thunder. The ground shook beneath their feet. Sparks flew in the storm. The true challenge had begun. The fight in the rain. The master's blade glowed bright as lightning split the sky. The human steel met it, sparks bursting with every clash. The rain poured heavier, drumming on armor, skin, and stone. The marketplace became a ring of shadows, every alien staring, every breath held. The master swung his blade with fury, each strike heavy enough to crush bone. But the human moved with speed, his steps light, his strikes sharp. Where the master was rage, the human was control. Where the master was chaos, the human was focus. The sound of steel rang again and again, echoing through the storm. The girl on her knees trembled, her heart racing as her eyes followed every movement. She wanted to close her eyes, to hide from the violence. But she could not look away. The master roared, his voice carrying over the thunder. "You are nothing, human. You will fall like the rest." The human's reply came quiet but clear. "Not today." With a sudden strike, the human forced the master back. Mud splashed under their boots. Water mixed with blood as a cut opened on the master's arm. The crowd gasped, shocked that their powerful master could bleed. The girl's lips parted, a whisper leaving her mouth. "He can fight him, he can win." The master's anger grew darker. He lunged forward with a savage strike, his glowing blade slashing the air. The human barely dodged, the heat of the energy burning against his cheek. He countered with a swift strike, his blade cutting into the master's armor. The fight became faster, more brutal. Every swing was a storm, every block a clash of thunder. The rain turned the ground into rivers of mud, but neither warrior slipped. They moved as if the storm belonged to them. The crowd screamed, some cheering the master, others watching in silence. Fear spread like smoke, for they had never seen anyone challenge him like this. The master fought harder, his movements desperate, his voice filled with rage. You cannot save her. She is mine. She will always be mine. The human's eyes burned with fire, his voice like iron. She belongs to herself, not to you. Their blades met again, sparks sprang. The human pushed forward, strike after strike, his movements faster, stronger. The master stumbled, his boots sinking deeper into the mud. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. The girl's hands pressed into the ground, tears mixing with rain. Every strike, every clash was for her. She had been forced to crawl, forced to suffer. But now someone fought for her, and it was changing everything. The master screamed, lifting his blade high for a killing blow. But the human turned, twisting his body. Steel flashed, lightning roared, and the master's glowing weapon flew from his hands. It spun through the air and landed in the mud with a heavy thud. The crowd gasped as silence fell. The master stood weaponless, his armored chest rising and falling. The human's blade pressed against his throat. Steady, cold, unstoppable. The storm raged above. But in the market all was still. The master's voice cracked with fury. You cannot kill me. The law protects me. The crowd belongs to me. The human's eyes did not move. His voice was low, dangerous. Then remember this night. Remember the moment a human broke you. The master froze, his pride shattered. The crowd murmured, fear and awe mixing in their whispers. Never before had their master been defeated. Never before had a human stood so tall in their streets. The girl's breath caught in her chest. Her heart pounded as she watched the human step back, his blade lowering. He did not kill the master. He had done something greater. He had taken his power away. The master stumbled back, his armor heavy, his mask cracked. He looked at the girl with hatred, but also with fear. For the first time, he knew she was no longer his. The human turned, his cloak heavy with rain. He walked toward the girl, his steps slow, steady, filled with purpose. The crowd parted in silence. No one dared to stop him. The storm above began to fade. But the fire in the market had only just begun. The girl's tears fell freely now. She looked at him, trembling, broken, yet alive. And when his hand reached out to her, she felt something she had never known before. Hope, the rescue. The storm began to ease, the heavy rain softening into a mist. The crowd was silent, every alien frozen in disbelief. Their master, the cruel one who ruled with fear, now stood broken, weaponless and trembling. And the human, the stranger, the outsider, still stood tall, his blade shining under the fading storm. The girl knelt in the mud, her body weak, her arms shaking. Her hair clung to her face, her eyes wide with shock and wonder. For the first time, she had seen her master afraid. For the first time, someone had stood for her. The human turned slowly, his cloak heavy with rain. He walked toward her with steady steps, every movement calm, controlled. The crowd parted as he passed, none daring to block his path. All eyes followed him, their whispers rising like the wind. He stopped before the girl, lowering himself to one knee. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with a gentle fire. He did not see an animal in the dirt. He saw someone worth saving. He extended his hand, his voice soft but firm. You don't belong here, he said. The girl looked at his hand, her heart pounding. She wanted to reach for it, but fear held her back. All her life, a hand meant pain. A hand meant chains, a hand meant control. The human's hand did not move closer. He waited, patient. The rain dripped from his fingers, but his eyes stayed on hers. He spoke again, his tone steady. You are not his, you are free. Her breath caught in her chest. Free, the word echoed in her mind, strange and powerful. She had never heard it spoken to her, never imagined it could belong to her. Her eyes filled with tears, her fingers trembling as she slowly reached forward. At last, her hand touched his. Warmth spread through her skin. Not pain, not chains, but something new. Hope. The crowd gasped. To them it was impossible. A slave taking the hand of a human, standing in defiance of her master. But it was real, and they could not deny what they saw. The human helped her rise, his strength steadying her frail body. He placed his cloak around her shoulders, shielding her from the cold rain and the sharp eyes of the crowd. She stood unsteady, but taller than she had ever stood before. For the first time she did not bow. Her master roared, his voice breaking with fury. She is mine, you cannot take her. She belongs to me. But the human turned his head, his voice sharp as iron. Not anymore. The crowd murmured, some in fear, some in awe. The balance of power had shifted. The master's chains were broken. The girl was no longer his. The human guided her forward, each step slow, each step heavy with meaning. The mud still clung to her feet, but her spirit felt lighter. She leaned against him, weak from hunger and pain. Yet inside her burned a strength she had never felt before. The master stumbled after them, his cracked mask dripping with rain, his voice desperate, filled with hate. You will regret this, human, you will both regret this. But his words fell empty. For the first time, no one in the crowd cheered for him. The people only watched as the human led her away. The marketplace that had been filled with laughter at her suffering now stood in silence. The whispers carried a different tone. Fear of the human, respect for his courage, and questions of what would come next. The girl looked back once, her eyes finding her master. His shadow still tall, but his pride shattered. She felt no fear now, only a promise in her heart. Never again. The human's hand stayed firm around hers as they walked into the night. The storm clouds parted, the moonlight breaking through. The city stretched before them, dark and dangerous. But for the first time in her life, she did not feel alone. Her master's voice still echoed in the distance. His threats, his rage, his promise of revenge. But beside her walked a protector, a stranger who had given her freedom, a human who had seen her not as property, but as a person. And though her body was weak, her spirit whispered strong. This was not the end. This was only the beginning. The journey begins. The market slowly faded behind them. The whispers of the crowd lingered in the air, carried by the rain. No one dared follow, no one dared stop the human. And the girl, for the first time in her life, walked without chains. Her steps were weak, her legs trembling, but every step away from her master felt like a victory. The cloak wrapped around her shoulders warmed her against the cold night. It was not just fabric, it was a shield, a promise. The human walked beside her, silent but steady, his eyes scanning the streets, watching every shadow, every corner. He knew the master's power would not vanish so easily. There would be consequences, there would be hunters. The city stretched before them, tall towers of stone and steel, glowing lights and endless darkness. Alien faces watched from windows, doors, and alleys, some filled with fear, others with quiet curiosity. The storm had ended, but the air still carried the weight of change. The girl looked up at the human, her voice quiet. "Why did you save me?" she asked. The human glanced at her, his expression calm but his eyes deep. "Because no one should live like that," he answered. "Because you deserved better." Her heart tightened at his words, simple but powerful. She lowered her gaze, unable to speak. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever seen her as more than property. They walked through narrow streets, the mud soft under their boots. The city around them was alive with strange sounds, machines humming, neon lights flickering. The girl clutched the cloak tighter, feeling safer but still afraid. "What will happen now?" she whispered. The human's voice carried steady. "Now you live." The words sank into her soul, heavy and unreal. To live, to be free, these were things she had never imagined. Yet here she was, walking beside someone who believed it for her. Behind them, the market still buzzed, The master's rage would not fade. His pride had been shattered before his people, and he would not rest until vengeance was his. Far above, unseen eyes watched from the rooftops. Figures cloaked in shadow moved with silent steps, messengers of the master, already carrying his orders. The girl and the human were not safe, not yet. The human seemed to sense it. His steps quickened, his hand never far from his weapon. He led her down winding alleys, across narrow bridges, through streets hidden from the common eyes. The girl followed, her trust growing with every step. Though she was afraid, she knew he would not let her fall. They stopped at a quiet corner, under the cover of an old broken wall. The human set down a small pack, pulling out a piece of bread. He handed it to her, his voice soft. "Eat," he said. Her hands shook as she took it, the memory of the mud still fresh in her mind. But this was different. This was not humiliation. This was kindness. She bit into it, tears rising in her eyes. The simple taste of clean food felt like a miracle. Her body cried with hunger. Her heart cried with relief. For the first time, she ate not as a slave, but as a person. The human watched her silently, then spoke. "You will need your strength," he said. "There will be dangers ahead." The girl nodded, swallowing hard. Her voice was small, but filled with new fire. "I will not go back." The human's eyes met hers, steady and certain. "You will not," he said. They stood again, the night stretching before them. The city lights glowed in the distance, bright but dangerous. Every step forward was a step into the unknown. But neither turned back. The girl looked once more over her shoulder. In the far distance, she thought she saw the shape of her master, a dark shadow against the fading storm, his mask broken, his pride destroyed, but his hatred still burning. She turned back quickly, her heart racing. The human's hand brushed against hers, steadying her. "Don't look back," he said quietly. "Your life is ahead now." Her breath steadied, her spirit rising. Yes, her life was ahead, not as property, not as an animal, but as someone free. The night swallowed them as they walked deeper into the city, the whispers of their story spreading behind them, and in the shadows, unseen enemies followed. Their journey had only begun.